く嘘だ。おっちゃんはやっぱり嘘つきだ。父上や僕のご先祖様が逃げたりするもんか。
Hello one and all, Jasper here, and almost a year ago I talked about one of my favorite shows, that being Vineland Saga, and how excited I was for the second season. Well, it's out now, and after going through it, can I still say it's one of the best? In fact, is it better than the first season? Well, you see, that's a complicated question to answer, but let's see if I can do it, starting with how it compares with the first season. Season 1 and 2 are very different beasts compared to one another. It's almost jarring at how they're the same series. So just because you love the first season does not mean you'll love the second, especially if what you loved about the first season was the action. The second season, by comparison, is a much slower story, and what action that does take place is at a much smaller scale and more grounded. So don't expect to see characters punching horses, or a dozen guys lifting a 24-ton ship and sprinting. This is a much more realistic setting than what we got previously. But that isn't to say there is no action, or that the action we get is bad. But given the setting, expect a lot more talking. Luckily for me though, the dialogue is on point in this season, and it's great to just see these characters interact with one another, both old and new. Einar is an early addition in this season for me, and he was probably the most relatable character, with some of the most selfless moments in the entire series. Man is just a good guy through and through, with maybe one or two splotches of grey here and there. Another important character introduced would be Katil, the wealthy farmer who buys Einar and Thorfinn, having them work on said farm with promises to free them should they complete the task he has given them. And honestly, probably my favorite character in this season. While looking at him through our modern lens, Katil is a bad man. After all, we are in agreement that slavery was not a good thing to do. But given the world he lives in and the society he's a part of, he really is a swell guy. Many of his former slaves choose to stay on his farm and work after he frees them, partly because likely their friends and family are all dead, like in the case of Einar, but also because he really does treat those who work for him swell, no matter what their status is. Then, tragedy befalls him and makes his character do a complete 180. He does a monstrous act that no one could ever defend, but you still can't help but get a sick feeling in your gut as everything around him looks like to be going up in smoke, that you understand why he's doing it, even if it is incredibly fucked up and wrong. It's not just new characters in this season. We get plenty of familiar faces, such as King Canute. It's very nice to see what is now a more accurate portrayal of the famous king. The devil on his shoulder being his late father, whispering on how to be a king, seeing just how far Canute is willing to go in order to achieve his heaven on earth goal. Speaking of dead characters, I was worried we wouldn't get to see him, but Askeladd makes a very powerful and beautiful appearance in A Dream of Thorfinn's, and it's always a joy to see this beautiful Welshman being a second father to this lad, even in death. Speaking of, it's probably about time to mention the protagonist of the show himself, Thorfinn, who is a far more fleshed out and interesting character simply because we have been with him from the start and know what he's gone through, and we can understand the choices he makes and the conclusion he arrives at. Even if we may not agree with him, we can still sympathize with him, which is always the most important part in a story. I'm an old-fashioned guy, personally, with a firm belief that some sons of bitches need to get knocked around, and that full pacifism is a recipe that ends in disaster for society and culture. I mean, hell, Thor's died and set his son down a very bloody path because of his pacifism, of only knocking fools out instead of taking heads. Yet, I still find little issue with Thorfinn's development and change despite these disagreements. However, my love for this season is held back a little bit because of 3 critiques I have for it. The first one is a part where a character named Arnheid is being rescued from slavery by her husband Gardar. It almost feels like a filler arc, though to be clear, it's good filler. This is GA quality, not Foxy Returns. Even though it's not filler and is very integral to the story, it's just that it overstays its welcome and comes right off the heels of Canute putting his plans into action to seize the farm from Katil. Had this story beat been told sooner or shrunken down a bit, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. Still, we do have some great moments, such as Thorfinn throwing hands with Snake. My second criticism is the climax of the season. And here's a big spoiler, so if you want to experience this for yourself, jump out now and come back later to tell me how wrong I am. But I have to say, personally, I don't buy it. Thorfinn gets his ass beat for a chance to see Canute. to try to reason with him to not take the farm. I was expecting a back and forth of Canute justifying his actions in order to achieve a greater good, and that his goal of creating heaven on earth could not be achieved without these terrible acts, while Thorfinn challenged this by pointing out other actions he could have taken that could have resulted in his goal, how the action he takes are made because he believes that those around him would act like him in a way, thus making the heaven he strives for just another hell. Yet we don't get that. Instead, when pressured on what he plans to do to stop Canute, Thorfinn says he will run away. And that's all it takes. Canute laughs, goes home, disbands his army, and the English are just, okay, sounds good. Yeah, no. I need something a little bit more. At least have him talk about how it's impossible to make heaven on earth if he needs to become a devil, or a bit more detail on how he pacified the English by having the two cultures intermingle and grow more accustomed to one another, making them one rather than two separate people. Just anything is better than, yeah, the English realized Canute was putting a lot of trust in them, so didn't rebel. Also, the reason Canute did this was because he didn't want to make Thorfinn busy running away. Finally, I need Thorfinn to be properly challenged on his values at this point because pure pacifism as he hopes to achieve will not work. Right now, it's currently painting the picture that everything his father Thor said was right, and there is wisdom in Thor's teaching, but let's not forget it was the strict level of pacifism that led to his death and his son eventually falling into revenge and violence. If Thorfinn sets off to Vineland, it's only a matter of time until he runs into the Comanche or some other violent tribe in the New World. But given historically how these settlements end up, maybe that will be the moment he is tested. Either way, even with these nitpicks, I cannot sing the praises of this season enough. And there is still so much I wish I had time to talk about. Snake being a dyed Askeladd, and I mean that in the best of ways. The dynamic between Ketil and his sons. How the series continues to make sure that you never want to fuck with someone who has Thor in their name. It's all still great. Make sure to check it out. Until then, stay safe, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.